panels, performances, everything you could imagine. And this next one, you guys could sit down. Yeah, go ahead. We'll talk about this panel in a second, but for right now, I want to let you know that we have a full slate of programming throughout the next 2 days. And also, if everybody's over there that's talking, if you guys could quiet down for 1 second. Shh. Thank you so much. So we have panels here all day, and then in the nighttime, it leads into music. We have performances from Passion Pit, John Popper, a Blues Traveler, Ketch Secor, Old Crow Medicine Show, Neil Giraldo, and a bunch of breakthrough artists that we're excited to present to you. And in these panels, we're talking about a whole slew of different topics, mainly focused on the music industry. And then we have 2 pillars of social impact that we're talking about today. One being music education and music education access, and the other being mental health in music, which are the 2 causes that we're championing here today that you're going to learn about in a little bit as well on the panel after this. But for this panel, this is actually, in terms of my interests, I think one of the most compelling topics and most right now topic in terms of the ecosphere of the music industry and where we're at and where it's headed. So I'm really excited to hear this conversation. And I'm sure all you guys will enjoy these panelists who are all incredible. And this is presented by RWS Global. Please give it up for the panel on turning music IP deals into experiences. I'm excited for it. Take it away, guys.
Hi, testing 1, 2, 3. Are we on? Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, everybody. How are you? All right. Awesome. It's so great to be here. I am Craig Laurie. I am the Chief Creative Officer at RWS Global, where we create large-scale, high-quality entertainment experiences for various venues around the world. You know, we have extensive experience developing experiences based on IP, and specifically music IP. I took Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts and brought that brand on board Holland America Cruise Lines a few years ago with a groundbreaking music experience, translating, a legacy cultural brand into an experience for the masses in the leisure and attractions industry. Also, Rolling Stone magazine, where we created a Rolling Stone Rock Room, a music experience as well for the leisure and attractions industry. And even as of lately, with IP, just a couple of months ago, we have developed a brand new stage experience with Bob Fosse's estate as well, celebrating that revolutionary director-choreographer. So creating with, IP in mind and experiences around IP is something that we do frankly, monthly at this point. However, creative ideas involving IP really only scale and have an impact when rights, approvals, and marketing align. And today, our conversation will reveal how deals actually get done. I am super excited for this conversation because as I feel that there's, so much access to so much on the internet, obviously through AI as well, it's good to understand, brass tacks, how to turn music IP into a live experience. So I want to talk with my friends here, the people who negotiate, design, and produce the experiences that bring music IPs to life. So let's get some introductions going. We have Lisa, Michele, and Brian. Lisa, take it away, please. A little bit about yourself.
Thanks. So I'm Lisa Oratz. I'm with Perkins Coie, and I'm co-chair of our film, television, and music practice. And I've been practicing sort of at this intersection of technology, intellectual property, and entertainment for far too many years that I don't want to count. And that ranges from things in each area individually, but my real sweet spot is where those really intersect. And particularly lately, a lot of experiential projects, whether it's involving AI, whether it's live, immersive. And to me, this is one of the most exciting areas because first and foremost, I'm excited because there's a live element. This is something that for a long time, has been a little bit dormant. And I'm also a big theater fan, so I think live experiences and these sort of interactive, immersive experiences are very cool, and that's something so we spend a lot of time with a lot of my clients on.
Amazing, amazing. Michele.
Michele, can you hear me? Am I on? Okay. My name's Michele Fleischli. I was on the manager panel 2 hours ago, but happy to be back. I am the owner of Like Management. We manage musical artists mostly, but I managed Tenacious D, and I had launched a festival called Festival Supreme with them for 5 years that we own and operate ourselves with no as independence, and brought a lot of collaborations to life. I did a immersive experience with Karen O at the Masonic Lodge in LA, and raised a good amount of money for a really amazing immersive idea that was unreal, called An Encounter with Lux Prima. And I've continually get these ideas brought to me by many artists because I'm good at doing it, apparently.
Awesome. And Brian, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Brian Mirakian, Senior Principal with Populous. And Populous is a multidisciplinary design firm. So we're an architecture firm. We specialize in buildings and places that bring people together, which is timely for this conversation today. So some of our notable work, Wembley Stadium in London, the Sphere in Las Vegas, places like Climate Pledge Arena, places that are of gathering, right, and places for shared experience. It's what we're passionate about, and it's what our focus has been for the better part of the last 40 years. I've been with the practice for 21 years, seen a lot of change during that time, but this is a really, really wonderful moment where people are craving live experiences maybe more than ever. And so I think it's really exciting for this discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you all. So before anything creative can happen, before things can go into creative development, rights really determine the playing field. So I'd like to ask, turn this over to Lisa, of course, anyone can join in, but can you walk us through which rights have to be cleared for an experiential music project? So whether it be masters, publishing, likeness, trademarks, etc.
Sure, and one of the interesting and fun for me, might be not always so fun for some of my clients, is that these experiential projects tend to be very layered. There's lots and lots of rights involved, and that includes music, personality rights, trademarks. So it can be very complex to make sure you have all the rights, but there's several buckets, and again, the specifics of a deal will shape exactly what you need. The first one obviously relates to music rights. And as many of you may know, when we talk about music, there's two different sets of rights we have to worry about. That's the underlying song, musical composition, which we talk about often as publishing rights. There's also, if you're using actual recorded versions, there's also rights in the sound recording, or we call master rights. So if you're using a specific recorded version, then you need to worry about both sets of rights. If you're not making your own recording, then that's a little bit easier because you don't have to deal with the master rights. And then the reason I say it's so layered is within each of these types of rights, there's a variety of rights. So one of the things that's almost universal to all of these type of deals are public performance rights, because you're most likely going to be doing this in front of a public audience. And I think you have PRO licenses through ASCAP and BMI that might work, but in many cases, there's elements of experiential entertainment that don't qualify for PRO licensing because they may be more dramatic, or you may be wanting to do things that put you outside of that. In addition, PRO licenses are blanket licenses. So if you are going to be licensing a lot, that makes sense. But if you only have a small number of songs, that may not make sense. So usually, unlike a lot of other rights clearance, for these type of deals, they tend to be negotiated deals as part of the other rights. And what are those other rights? So you have sync rights if you're incorporating any of the music into any kind of audiovisual content, then you need what's called a sync license, which again is a negotiated license. Sometimes they're mechanical rights or print rights, again, depending on what you do. But usually, because these are fairly complicated deals, you're going to end up dealing with the publisher, so you want to kind of get all of those music rights in a bundle. And then, beyond the music rights, you're almost always dealing with some sort of talent. And so you need to worry about, they have rights of publicity and able to use, ability to use their name, image, likeness, and voice. As well as really any participants and contributors may have copyright interests in what they create, so you want to make sure you get licensing. The other layer in here that's quite common for experiential entertainment is branding and trademarks, because you often have a branding component, whether it's a sponsor or whether, whatever the background, that's quite common. So you'll need to think about trademark rights for any brands, as well as sometimes if you have bands that may have trademark rights in their band name or even sometimes in individual names. The last thing I'll mention, it's not really sort of rights you need to acquire, but you also need to think about union issues. If any of your talent has union ties, then that's something that you're going to have to think about in terms of how you go about acquiring rights to work with various talent. So those are the main buckets.
So fun.
Yeah.
So many rights.
It's fun for us, not so fun, is it?
No, I
for some
know.
of my clients?
No, I know. I'm on the receiving side of. I'm the person that's like, and now I got to take this back to my artist and say, guess what? It's complicated, and we're gonna have some fun. Continue figuring it all out. But it is great.
It is,
Matt, when you get together.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely very multi-layered, as Lisa said. But one of the reasons why I was so looking forward to having this conversation is that you can't, when you're developing something, and especially for someone in my seat, as you're developing a live experience, you can't just do anything. There are really anything needs to be cleared by the music IP that you are representing in your experience. So thank you for that. To Lisa and Michele, though, I'm anxious to hear, what are the biggest approval bottlenecks, and what commonly disrupts, a deal?
Yeah, and the challenges, particularly with music, is there can be so many different rights holders. Even if you have a song that's like written by the performer, singer-songwriter, you think, well, there's one person. The rights can actually be split between so many different people, and you have to clear rights with all those people. And usually deals are made on a most favored nation basis, so you may have one person who's willing to agree to a particular deal, but only if everybody else agrees. So what ends up happening is one rights holder, even a very small rights holder, can both delay the deal because they don't get back to you or hold things up. So just trying to navigate, all of the layers and people who hold rights, can really be a bottleneck. I'll mention one other thing that I think creates a bottleneck in this particular area is, a lot of times when you're clearing rights with publishers, they want to know how you're going to use it because they want to make sure it's not done in a way that, connects the music to something. But in a lot of not all, but a lot of experiential entertainment, things are fluid. They're not always static. They may be interactive, it may be user-generated, so it's hard to be able to give them those experiences. So I think we spend a lot of time negotiating approval rights when we don't really know what music might be used adjacent to. So those are the two things I think are
Totally.
big bottlenecks.
Absolutely. Did you want to add to that?
No, I agree, and in my side, clearing music, there could be and I try to tell my artists too, when you're just freely giving somebody publishing, when you're in the room and you're like, oh, that person was there, we're going to give them 10%. I'm like, this could be forever, If something comes back, sometimes the clearance is, it becomes a bottleneck, and it's been, an issue with a lot of my artists that gave things away and they can't clear it. So, and I appreciate that you brought up sync rights, because a lot of people, we find things that were filmed and it's on, it shows up on YouTube, not by user generated, but even by the brand that they assigned rights to, and you're like, you can't do that with our proprietary content. So I appreciate that you brought that up.
No, absolutely. Michele, what, from a manager's point of view, what makes the rights conversation, let's say, painful versus productive?
Well, I think exactly that. A lot of the, what Lisa said, a lot of the times you don't know what the end is going to be. And you have the idea, the concept, but then other brands get involved and they want additional, there's additional asks. So I think those things, it's hard to get ahead of. But now being on having been on both sides of it, I feel like I understand how it's so hard to bring these things to life in general. So when somebody is there, you kind of want to support them in their journey. So I think it's just having good conversations with people and understanding that it's a process and kind of making sure that there's just good communication.
And you're right, and sometimes those asks come up late in the game, because you asked before about things that, you bring somebody new in, you bring a new grad in, and suddenly you know what your deal is, but someone goes, oh, can we just do this? And they don't realize how complicated that little thing is. So, getting people aligned on trying to stick with the program.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, there's also, the thought of, when music IP is really ready for, expansion. Not every catalog or artist is built for experiential expansion. So, Michele, I was wondering, what do labels, estates, and managers evaluate before saying yes to turning their IP into an experience?
Well, I mean, everybody's been probably aware of all these catalog sales. That was like the hot, 2020 COVID happening. But a lot of people, made some really amazing, I've seen really amazing things with friends of mine that, have had really good results with that. I'm not sure. I can't completely say. I think you have to have the legacy. I mean, I've worked with Tenacious D for 26 years now, and they're in their 25th anniversary of their first record. They're in the 25th anniversary of the film that we made together in 2006. So, a lot of people are coming to us with these really, for me, I'm like, let's do it. I kind of always want, I'm so curious, bringing back the experience of, the film and doing these pop-up events. And the guys are like, I don't know, is it time or is this too self-indulgent? So I'm not, as far as on the right side, everybody that's coming to us, I feel so reinvigorated by their excitement of how long they've been with the band. People came up to me today and said, I've been a fan of theirs for so long. It's important for the fan experience, wherever the last conversation. So, me as a fan and also on the other side, how to continue the legacy is really important. So, I guess I'm not fully answering the question, but I've been on both sides.
No, totally.
I can chime in a little bit too,
Yeah,
because I think, catalogs come in all different kinds of statuses when it comes to rights. Some are really well organized, some are a mess, some have really clear rights holders and clear splits, and others, maybe the record keeping wasn't good. So I think one of the clear things is, catalogs that are well organized, well structured are much easier. The other thing it makes it a lot easier is if, a lot of times the music you want doesn't fall into this category, but doing a deal where the artist, if there's an artist involved and the artist either has significant control over the music or at least influence, makes a lot of that. Because they can, again, if you're trying to corral a bunch of right holders, if you have an artist who can, ride shot with you and try to, corral people, that can help a lot. And then works that have fewer rights holders, different types of music, some have very few, some have ridiculous numbers. So I think catalogs that are well organized, have fewer rights holders, and have some strong person you have a relationship with that can help you manage, going out and getting those rights can really make it a lot easier.
Yeah, I would say that. Sorry, I would say that for film too. I took a crazy project on because I loved the documentary, and I was told that the label, who controlled most of the music, was okay with it. We cleared every rights except for the artist's label at the end of the day, and I had sold it to Showtime, and this is not experiential, but it was crushing to be looking at a poster for a movie that won't come out because the guy's label and the artist has passed on. So
Wow, interesting. Michele, wondering, how has the whole AI boom helped or hindered the rights process? Has it become more nuanced or complicated? Yes.
Lisa.
Do you want me to chime in first? So, and I do a lot of work in the AI space as on the tech side of my practice, but also working with a lot of artists. And I think there's a couple of, this has obviously become a huge part of these projects, including both projects where AI is part of it, or where people just want to use AI to create some of the content. And there's two big buckets that we deal with a lot. One is the fact that if you are using AI and you have talent, a lot of times now you want to get rights to create digital replicas or synthetic versions of people so that you can more easily blend them into various aspects of the project and do things. And that's a tricky situation because a lot of times people are involved, they're sort of partly on board, but they're also very nervous about this technology. Anything new, people fear. And so you'll have this negotiation over writers and what they can do and can't do. And sometimes they say, well, and sometimes people say, well, you can't use AI in connection with this person, but really anything we do, even just putting them in a search engine, is AI. So that's part of this negotiation, is dealing with people's rights. The other area, and we could have a whole conversation on this, so I won't get too deep, is there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding about copyright issues, about whether things can be protected if you use AI, and whether you're going to infringe people's rights. And the one thing I'll say is 90% of what you read on this is just flat wrong. There's just so much understanding. And I will say I'm very pro AI, but I'm also pro artist. And I think the bottom line is that works as a whole, unless it's entirely done by AI, is certainly possible to get protection. And we have gotten in the film space a number of copyright registrations on AI films, even very AI-forward films. And from the user standpoint, if you use it and you, again, have good rules and good processes, you really don't have to worry from a practical standpoint about infringing, again, if you do it right. So having good policies in place, getting good advice on how to navigate that can really help smooth the path. But I think it's just everybody is wringing their hands because there's this new thing. And we've been dealing with new technology, including in entertainment, for many years. It's new, different, but it's really not that new.
Interesting. I'm eager to see how it continues to, help and maybe, I don't want to say hinder, but affect.
We were talking.
industry,
We
yeah.
were talking about the ABBA voyage
Yeah.
experience,
In London,
and the beauty of that to me was sort of both sides of the coin. To be
Yeah.
able to see there was a live band with ABBA, who wasn't. So I was like, was it important to have the live artist to make it feel a little bit more human, or was it, I don't know. It's just an interesting question.
And I'll note that the clients that I work with, even those that are really AI native studios or music platforms or musicians, they're very much about human-centered. They're not about just sticking it in. They're really about using this as a tool to enhance their creativity and to make sure they're preserving all of that. And I know people are sometimes skeptical about that, but I've had a lot of these conversations, and I've seen even in the last year a little bit of a shift in attitudes and people realizing these can be tools that can be helpful. They can elevate diverse voices. They can make, there's lower barriers to entry. So there's a lot of benefits as long as, along with some legitimate concerns and fears.
Before we move on to some questions that I have for Brian about design, venue design and such, I did want to talk about, as we're saying with ABBA, the ABBA voyage. Can you speak about grand rights and potentially getting that cleared or ensuring that there's no infringement if there's specific things that are looked for?
Yeah. So grand rights, which are basically dramatic rights, they're a little bit more complicated to clear. But we've been clearing this again in stage and other live experiences where they are dramatic. So, although it's and it's all negotiated, there aren't blanket licenses or mechanical licenses. But it's not, it's just part of the process. You do, like anything else, good to start early because these things can take time and people are getting more comfortable. So sometimes when you approach people and you want to do something that's a little different, it may take them a little more time to get their hands around it. But, we haven't ultimately, run into problems that were that much different if they're grand rights versus small rights, which are more non-dramatic rights.
For anyone in the audience that might not have gone through rights clearances or anything like that, grand rights, at least for something that I do in creating live experiences, centers sometimes around ensuring that you are not trying to impersonate or copy an artist. And just an anecdote, there was a production that we were doing once where we had to get clearance from an artist's estate, and there was definitely some stipulations regarding when the music from that artist was being performed. I'm not going to name the artist nor the estate, but let's just say that the person singing the song could sit at a piano but could not face the piano, could not have their hands on the piano, could not wear glasses, things like that. So it's very much so ensuring that no one is trying to portray said artist.
Yeah, I think the portrayal, I mean, the personality, we talk about music rights per se, but the personality rights and making, and all of that stuff is very sensitive.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of those tricky areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Continuing on with some, creating IP experiences and going into maybe design. Brian, how you doing? How does venue design and audience behavior influence whether an IP, translates physically to make it impactful?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and the interesting dynamic I think in the world we live in today, kind of like talking about the artificial side, the AI design side. The interesting thing that we're seeing is that like in this world that we're facing today, where we kind of don't know what's real and what's artificial, it's kind of scary actually. But what we see is that more people are gravitating towards real experiences than ever before, and especially in the world of live entertainment and sports, the place where we live, people want those kind of real, authentic experiences more than ever, and it's actually a really wonderful opportunity in terms of how do we think about designing these physical places, right, for audiences and for artists, right, to connect, and. So it's a really invigorating, period in time from my perspective to think about how we can consider new forms of innovation, right? I've been really fascinated by Fred again, and what's happening with his live shows on this USB tour, and the way that he's just creating this really interesting environment, right, where the show takes place. There's obviously incredible levels of artistry just with the music that's being released. He's collaborating with Thomas Bangalter with Daft Punk and Underworld the other night in London, and it was just incredible when you saw kind of the energy that's happening from the show itself. But from our perspective, when we're going into a design problem, we may be working with a client like MSG, and when we embarked on the Sphere in Vegas, one of the interesting aspects of that was solving for problems where there were not even technologies that existed at that point in time, right? It's kind of looking into, the crystal ball as far as you can in terms of here's what we want to create. Now, how do we do it in terms of innovating around new forms of technology, new aspects of architecture, new ways that we can think about stage design, new ways that we can think about delivering audiovisual in ways that have never been done before. And on top of that, how do we think about venues that can shapeshift based on what happens for U2 or the Backstreet Boys or Luke Combs or whoever it may be, but then how does that also become a platform for the Wizard of Oz, right? Or something entirely different in terms of the surface becoming a platform for digital art, but then also advertising. And it all fits in this financial model, right? There's an economic piece of this as well. But I think what's really cool is that if you think about a stadium, you think about an arena, you think about an amphitheater, you think about these future forms of these buildings, there's an incredible new horizon in the way that we imagine design, and we're bringing cultural influence into the process. We're bringing the artist into the middle of the process. We're bringing the fan into the middle of it, and obviously we're bringing our clients into the middle of it from a financial and operational perspective. And it's a really potent sort of combination that delivers these buildings that you see today. But it's very collaborative, and I think it's actually a very exciting point in time.
Amazing. Don't put that microphone down yet. So how do stakeholder decisions influence the creative scope, design choices, and story direction, and how approvals, how they can impact, let's just say, production workflow? and such? Because I can talk on that as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just take like an arena, for instance, as an example. Like to bring like a new building to life, like let's say Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, right? That's a is that home to you? Okay, so there you go. So that's like typically a 2-year process, or a 2-year design process, right? And typically a 2-year construction process, right? And that was a pretty unique project because it was an adaptation, right, of a World's Fair, pavilion, and it was very complex engineering-wise. But these are multi-year projects, right? They can be a half decade and sometimes longer because of the political climate and land acquisition and a million things, right? It's candidly kind of a miracle when these projects, are built. But what happens is that, like, as I mentioned, you're bringing so many people into the fold. You're answering to so many stakeholders, and what we find is that these stakeholder groups are widening, right? And so athletes more and more. For instance, if we work with an NBA team, oftentimes the athletes are at the table as well, talking about kind of like how. You can think about cultural influence, right? Because athletes now are entertainers. They're building brands in their own right. We're taking into from an entertainer's perspective, there's so many aspects related to artist talent rooms and back of house considerations, and how do you load and load out a show in a different way? How do we think about rigging capacities and all the sort of amazing engineering solutions that are required? How do we think about audiences in terms of how do we deliver experiences for audiences in a new way? 15 years ago, we might have like 5 different seating products in a venue. Now we probably have 50, right? Because you're trying to connect with every, fan demographic in a different way, from a high net worth individual all to a family, right? Or somebody that's going to be on a date night, and somebody that's, a pure fan that's been going for many years. You're trying to connect with every audience segmentation. And at an operational level, right? How do we operate the venue, but how do we generate revenue? Right, in a really dynamic way, because you're talking about billion-dollar investments in some cases. So you're answering to a lot of stakeholders. You have to do it in a very artful way. But what we find is the groups are expanding, right? There's more influence, and it's kind of like conducting a symphony in some respects, right? You're trying to kind of bring all these pieces into the fold and try to create something meaningful that comes from it.
Yeah, and I mentioned Climate Pledge is an interesting example, because we actually worked for a firm representing a lot of things on Climate Pledge, and dealing with not just different stakeholders, but stakeholders that have different objectives, and whether that's part of the design or whether seating or just the venue space. There's so many different constituencies you have to deal with it. It's very challenging. I agree with you on that.
Brian, wondering. With all of those pieces that you say, coming together and such, can you give some examples of venues that, you see being very successful with all of that?
Well, I think that I'll just kind of take the Sphere as an example. What's interesting about that is that it's a quantum leap forward for entertainment in a lot of ways, right? I mean, artists now are using this as not only a platform to deliver their music, but there's this visual spectacle, right? That's part of it. What's fascinating about that building is that there's so many dimensions to it, right, from an audience standpoint. But the cool thing about it is, like, people fundamentally think that it's like technology driven. The reality is it's really human driven, right? When you're there with 18,000 people, and you're sharing this experience. It's a very real thing, and I remember at the climax of the U2 show. I was fortunate to be there the opening night. Nobody had seen it before, so it was like they're very protective, right, about anything going online. So people were just sharing this moment together. But when they played With or Without You at the very end, as Devlin, beautiful, painting came to life in the Sphere. It was just so emotional. People were like crying, because they were so moved, like, emotionally. And I think that's the thing that's really cool, is that we have this amazing opportunity as designers, and everyone's a designer in the space in some regard, to create this powerful, like, emotional experience. And for the work that we do and for the ways that we connect with fans, the way that we're helping artists deliver something unique, it's fundamentally about emotional experience, because it's harder and harder than ever, I think, to connect with audiences. Like getting your artwork, getting your art on a streaming platform and connecting. There are some artists that do it extremely well, right? There are many artists, right, that are just trying to find these ways to connect with audiences in a different way. And the physical environments, the shows, the ways that we can create these real life experiences, to me is the most exciting part of what we do. And to me, I think that actually we're entering into kind of a renaissance period where we're going to see more of this experimentation and innovation more than ever.
Yeah, and it's not just emotional experiences, but emotional shared experience, which is very different and something that, again, we've lost for a little bit. And so bringing this back, I think, is just really
I think so. I completely agree. And, the data, the statistics, everything that we're constantly looking at always is pointing to that from the COVID times and, with everyone being so separated, we're still not out of that. And people are still looking to have shared experiences for sure. And I also do think that when it comes to any sort of design of a venue or frankly representing any sort of IP, authenticity is 100% key. I think that true fans will be able to sniff out the baloney, if you know what I'm saying. And so I think that really staying true and authentic to the IP, to the artist, and to what the fans love about that artist is paramount. Just a couple more questions because we only have a couple more minutes. Michele, how do you approach balancing artist authenticity, there you go with that word again, hey, with operational practicality?
Well, we're Lisa, I have bands that have like wild ideas, and then there's reality, So it's finessing the reality and getting it as close. I think I pulled it off with. I worked with MSG, which built the Sphere, but pre-COVID they came into Karen and Danger Mouse this experiential thing. It was right before COVID, actually. It was like the last of the we did these events that were like 250 people at a time. You sat. This whole experience happened with their incredible album. It's my 10 of 10. It's perfect. MSG came to us and they offered us a nice fee that was extremely helpful. But we had to. There's so many conditions. You have to meet people halfway or figure things out and I was just relieved that we, found a way. And I think it was one of the highlights of my career. And I wish it could have been shared more. I was telling Brian earlier, I wish I knew him because when we did it and Karen wanted to bring in a trusted producer that she had worked with before, but he was a film, came from the film world, and the idea was to have this tour, and there was just no way to do it. It was a ginormous rock that couldn't be moved around, customized into these spaces. But it was, to be able to go on the opening night and sit next to David Lynch, R.I.P., rest in peace, next to my stepfather, next to Karen's father, and Brad Pitt, and all these people, just freaking out. And it was this shared experience that, still one of the most amazing things, but it's just really, a lot of it is, you need the funding and you need to have people that understand that these different, there's ways to work through it, with our festival, like Jack, we had so much fun with our sponsors, we really found a way to have it feel connective, and additive instead of just here's a check or here's the thing that we need, and I enjoy it. I think it's a challenge, and because everybody's got there's a lot more people, rights holder, a lot of more stakes, higher stakes. But I really enjoy when you find it with the artist and with the partners. I don't know if that hopefully that.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Anybody else want to chime in with that? No, we're good. Well, listen, we are at time. I hope you all enjoyed this. I'd like to thank Artists for Action and Let Music Fill My World for having us. This was great. Thank you all so much.